The year was 1879, and the stagecoach rattled dangerously along the rough terrain outside Tucumcari, New Mexico territory, as Gabrielle Johnson clutched her swollen belly and prayed for safe passage. 6 months pregnant and traveling alone to meet her brother after the death of her husband, she never expected the journey west would test her will to survive in such a terrifying manner. "Hold tight, folks," the driver shouted as the coach hit another deep rut. "Crossing through a patchy pass now. Might get rough." Rough was an understatement. The other passengers, a salesman with a handlebar mustache, an elderly couple returning from visiting their daughter in Santa Fe, and a stern-faced banker, all gripped whatever they could as the coach bucked wildly beneath them. Gabrielle winced as a sharp pain radiated across her abdomen. "Please, not now," she whispered, rubbing her belly soothingly. The elderly woman beside her patted her hand. "First child, dear," Gabrielle nodded, forcing a smile despite her discomfort. "Yes, madam. My Thomas never got to know. Influenza took him 3 months ago back in Missouri." "I'm sorry for your loss," the woman said, but her sympathetic words were cut short by a terrifying sound, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. "Bandits!" the driver screamed. "Hold on." The stagecoach lurched forward, horses whinnying in terror as the driver urged them to greater speed. Gabrielle's heart hammered in her chest as she heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. More gunshots rang out, and the passengers ducked instinctively. "Oh, Lord!" the elderly woman cried, clutching her husband's arm. Suddenly, the stagecoach hit what felt like a boulder, and Gabrielle was thrown against the door. The latch, weakened by the rough journey, gave way. Before she could scream, she was airborne, her body hurled from the racing coach. In that suspended moment of terror, time seemed to slow. Gabrielle saw the ground rushing toward her and her baby, and she knew they would both die there in the dusty, unforgiving landscape of New Mexico territory. But instead of the hard impact she expected, she felt strong arms catch her, heard the breath leave a man's lungs as they both tumbled to the ground, his body absorbing most of the impact. "I've got you both," a deep voice assured her as they came to a stop in the dirt. Dazed, Gabrielle looked up into the most startlingly blue eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath the brim of a well-worn cowboy hat. The man cradled her protectively, his breathing ragged from the effort. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, concern etched across his features as he gently helped her sit up. I don't think so," Gabrielle stammered, her hands immediately going to her belly. She felt movement within her baby was alive. The man whistled sharply, and a magnificent black stallion trotted over. "Name's Nathan Keller," he said, still supporting her with one strong arm. "And we need to get you out of here. Those aren't ordinary bandits. They're the Reeves gang, and they don't leave witnesses." In the distance, the stagecoach continued its wild journey, the bandits in close pursuit. They hadn't noticed the fallen passenger, not yet. "My bags," Gabrielle began, but Nathan was already helping her onto his horse. "We'll worry about possessions later. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you and your little one safe." He swung up behind her with surprising agility for such a tall man and urged the horse into a gallop, away from the road and toward a cluster of rock formations. "I'm Gabrielle Johnson," she managed between jolts, "and I thank you for saving us, Mr. Keller." "Nathan," he corrected, his arms secure around her as they rode. "And thank me when we're safely away. There's an old line shack not far from here where we can shelter until it's safe to move on." As they rode, Gabrielle became acutely aware of Nathan's steady presence behind her, the solid wall of his chest, the careful way he guided the horse to minimize jostling her. He smelled of leather, horses, and the wild sage that dotted the landscape. "Are you a lawman?" she asked over the sound of hoofbeats. A short, humorless laugh escaped him. No, madam, just a rancher with bad timing. Was tracking a mountain lion that's been getting my calves when I saw the stage coming with those riders behind it. Then I'm grateful for that mountain lion, Gabrielle said, wincing as another pain seized her. Nathan felt her tension. Are you sure you're not hurt, the baby? She said, her voice tight. I'm afraid the fall might have. I'm having pains. Nathan's arm tightened around her and he urged his horse faster. Hang on, Mrs. Johnson. That shack isn't far and there's a spring nearby. My friend's mother is a midwife. I can fetch her once you're settled. Gabrielle, she corrected softly, and thank you again. The line shack appeared as they crested a small rise, a humble structure of weathered wood that had stood against countless desert storms. Nathan helped Gabrielle dismount with careful hands, then quickly scanned the horizon before leading her inside. The interior was spare but clean. A small table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed along one wall, a pot-bellied stove and shelves stocked with basic provisions. Nathan quickly lit a lamp, then helped Gabrielle to the bed. Rest here. I'll fetch some water and check for any signs of pursuit. He paused, clearly uncomfortable leaving her. Will you be all right for a few minutes? Gabrielle nodded, though her face was pale with worry. Yes, I think so. The pains have eased somewhat. Nathan filled a cup from a canteen at his belt and handed it to her before stepping outside. Gabrielle sipped the water gratefully, her mind spinning with the day's events. She'd left her home in St. Louis with such hope, despite her grief. Her brother owned a small mercantile in Tucumcari, and he'd written that she could help with the books and raise her child among family. Now she was miles from her destination, her belongings likely stolen, in a shack with a stranger, a handsome, heroic stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. When Nathan returned, his expression was grave. The stagecoach got away, but the Reeves gang will be combing the area once they realize a passenger is missing. We should stay put until morning. Gabrielle nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. I have to reach Tucumcari. My brother George is expecting me. Nathan's eyebrows rose. George Johnson owns the mercantile on Central Street. You know him. Tucumcari isn't that big. Everyone knows everyone. Nathan removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair in need of a trim. I supply beef to his store. He's a good man. Relief washed over Gabrielle. If Nathan knew George, perhaps he wasn't as much a stranger as she'd feared. I'll ride for town at first light, Nathan continued, moving to check the stove. Bring back help and let your brother know you're safe. What about the Reeves gang? Nathan's jaw tightened as he added wood to the stove. 8 of them against 1 of me wouldn't be smart odds, but I know these hills better than they do. I can slip past them. He turned to face her, his blue eyes serious. How are you feeling now, truly? Gabrielle considered the question. The pain had subsided, but she still felt shaky. Better, I think. The baby is moving, which is a good sign. That's good. Nathan's voice softened. How far along are you? 6 months. It's been a difficult pregnancy. She looked down at her hands, remembering those early weeks after Thomas died, when she'd been too grief-stricken to eat or sleep properly. I fear I haven't been as careful as I should. Nathan pulled one of the chairs close to the bed and sat, his large frame making the simple wooden furniture seem tiny. My sister had 4 children. I know a bit about what to watch for. If the pains come regular-like or if you start bleeding, you tell me right away. His matter-of-fact tone was oddly comforting. You seem very calm about all this. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. Panicking never helped a situation. Besides, I've delivered plenty of calves in my day. Despite everything, Gabrielle found herself smiling. I'm hardly a cow, Mr. Keller. Nathan, he reminded her, the smile reaching his eyes this time. And no, you certainly are not, but the principles aren't so different. Rest, calm, clean water, and knowing when to help and when to let nature take its course. As night fell, Nathan prepared a simple meal from the provisions in the shack: beans, jerky softened in the cooking water, and hard biscuits. Gabrielle ate gratefully, realizing how hungry she was. As they ate, Nathan asked about her journey west, and she found herself telling him about Thomas, their brief marriage, and her hopes for a new start in Tucumcari. Thomas was a good man, she said, staring into her tin cup of water. We'd been married only a year when the influenza took him. He was so excited about the baby. Nathan nodded, his eyes kind. It takes courage to make this journey alone in your condition. Not courage so much as necessity, Gabrielle admitted. There was nothing left for me in Missouri. They lapsed into comfortable silence as the wind picked up outside, howling around the corners of the shack. Gabrielle shivered despite the warmth from the stove. "Are you cold?" Nathan asked, already rising to fetch his bedroll from his saddlebags. "A little," she admitted. He unrolled the heavy blanket and draped it over her. "Try to sleep if you can. I'll keep watch. What about you? You need rest too?" Nathan shook his head, checking his rifle before settling into one of the chairs. "I'm used to long nights. My ranch is a day's ride from here, and I've spent plenty of nights under the stars tracking strays." Gabrielle wanted to protest, but exhaustion was overtaking her. As she drifted toward sleep, she murmured, "Thank you, Nathan. Not just any man would have risked his life for a woman he didn't know." His reply came softly through the gathering darkness. "Any decent man would have done the same." "No," Gabrielle said with certainty, sleep slurring her words. "Not just anyone could have caught me like that. You saved 2 lives today." She didn't hear his response as sleep claimed her, but if she had, she would have heard him say quietly, "And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Gabrielle woke to sunlight streaming through the single small window and the aroma of coffee. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was back in St. Louis, and Thomas would be bringing her breakfast in bed as he sometimes did. Then reality returned: the stagecoach, the fall, and Nathan. He sat at the table, cleaning his revolver with methodical care. When he noticed she was awake, he set the weapon aside and poured coffee into a tin cup. "Morning," he said, bringing her the cup. "How are you feeling?" Gabrielle pushed herself to a sitting position, relieved to find no pain in her abdomen. "Much better. The baby is quite active this morning." Nathan's weather-beaten face softened. "Good sign. I checked outside at dawn. No sign of the gang, but I found tracks about half a mile east. They're searching, but they went the wrong way. So we're safe for now." "For now," he agreed, returning to the table where a small pot of beans was warming on a makeshift wire stand over a candle. "Breakfast isn't fancy, but it'll keep your strength up." As they ate, Nathan outlined his plan. "I'll ride to Tucumcari today, bring back your brother in a wagon. It's too far for you to ride horseback in your condition." Gabrielle nodded, though the thought of being left alone made her uneasy. "How long will you be gone?" "If I push hard, I can be there by midday and back with help before dark." He studied her face. "Will you be all right alone? I can show you how to use the rifle." "I know how to shoot," Gabrielle said, surprising herself with her steady voice. "Thomas taught me." Said a woman alone should know how to protect herself. Nathan nodded approvingly. "He sounds like he was a wise man." He hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry for your loss, Gabrielle, truly." The simple sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. "Thank you." After breakfast, Nathan prepared to leave, checking his weapons and filling canteens from the nearby spring. Before mounting his horse, he showed Gabrielle where everything was stored in the shack and made sure she was comfortable with the rifle he was leaving behind. "Stay inside," he instructed. "There's enough food for the day and plenty of water. If anyone comes who isn't me or your brother, hide in that root cellar." He pointed to a trapdoor partially concealed by a threadbare rug. "I'll be fine," Gabrielle assured him, though her heart fluttered nervously at the thought of his departure. In just one day, she had come to rely on his steady presence. Nathan stood awkwardly by his horse for a moment, as if reluctant to leave. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he finally said, swinging into the saddle. "Nathan," Gabrielle called as he turned the horse, "please be careful." His smile transformed his serious face, creating crinkles around his eyes that suggested he had once smiled more often. "Always am, Mrs. Johnson." As he rode away, Gabrielle watched until horse and rider were just a speck on the horizon. Then, with a sigh, she closed the door and bolted it. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Gabrielle occupied herself by straightening the already neat shack, then sat by the window, alternating between watching the landscape and reading the only book in the shack, a dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans. By mid-afternoon, the baby's movements had become more pronounced, almost as if sensing her anxiety. Gabrielle sang softly, old lullabies her mother had taught her, hoping to soothe both herself and her child. When she heard hoofbeats approaching, her heart leaped to her throat. Peering carefully through the window, she was relieved to see Nathan's familiar figure, but he was alone and riding hard. She opened the door as he dismounted, noting the grim set of his face. "What's wrong? Where's George?" Nathan strode quickly inside, bolting the door behind him. "The Reeves gang hit Tucumcari this morning. They robbed the bank and shot the sheriff. Your brother was wounded trying to protect a customer." Gabrielle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "He'll live," Nathan assured her quickly. "Bullet went clean through his shoulder." But the town's in chaos. Marshals organized a posse to go after the gang. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I told George you were safe with me, and he asked me to keep you that way until he's back on his feet." Gabrielle sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "The stage driver." "The other passengers made it to town safely yesterday evening. Driver reported you missing, presumed." Nathan hesitated. "Well, they thought the worst. George was beside himself until I arrived with news. So everyone thinks I'm dead except you and George." Nathan nodded grimly. "Which might work to our advantage. If the Reeves gang is looking for missing passengers, they won't be looking for you specifically." Gabrielle processed this information, her mind racing. "What do we do now?" "We wait," Nathan said, checking his rifle. "The posse is tracking the gang north. Once they're dealt with, or at least well away from here, we can safely get you to town." "And how long might that be?" Nathan's expression was apologetic. "Could be days. That gang knows how to disappear when they want to." Days alone in a lined shack with a man she barely knew, it was hardly proper. But then, nothing about her situation was conventional. "I suppose we have little choice." "I'm sorry," Nathan said, genuine regret in his voice. "I know this isn't ideal. If there was a safer way to get you to town." "No," Gabrielle said firmly. "You've done nothing but help me since the moment we met. I trust your judgment." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes at her words, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "Thank you for that. I promise I'll keep you and your little one safe." That night, despite Nathan's protests, Gabrielle insisted on preparing dinner from the shack's supplies. "I need to keep busy," she explained, "and you've done enough. Besides, I'm quite capable." Nathan watched with undisguised appreciation as she transformed the simple ingredients into a surprisingly tasty meal. "You're a fine cook, Mrs. Johnson." "My mother made sure of it," Gabrielle said, a hint of sadness in her smile. "She said a woman should know how to make a home warm and welcoming, no matter how humble. She taught you well." Nathan helped her clean up after the meal, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked in the small space. Each contact sent an unexpected warmth through Gabrielle that she tried to dismiss as gratitude or the simple human need for connection after trauma. That night, despite Gabrielle's insistence that they could share the watch, Nathan again took the chair, rifle across his lap. "I sleep light," he assured her. "Always have. You need the rest more than I do." In the morning, Gabrielle woke to find Nathan dozing in the chair, his head tilted at an angle that would surely leave him with a sore neck. She moved quietly, preparing coffee as he had done the day before. The domestic normalcy of the act struck her as strangely comforting. When the aroma of coffee roused him, Nathan blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to do that." "Consider it a small repayment for your many kindnesses," Gabrielle said, handing him a cup. They settled into an unexpected routine over the next 2 days. Nathan would hunt in the early mornings, bringing back rabbits or wild turkey for their meals. Gabrielle would cook and keep the shack in order. They talked during meals and in the evenings at first about practical matters, then gradually about their lives, hopes and losses. Nathan told her about his small ranch north of Tucumcari, where he raised cattle and bred horses. "It's not much compared to some spreads," he admitted, "but it's mine, paid for in full last year." "You must be very proud," Gabrielle said. "Building something from nothing takes tremendous strength, or stubbornness," Nathan replied with a self-deprecating smile. "My father called it that. He wanted me to stay in Pennsylvania, work in the steel mills like he did." "What made you come west?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "There was a girl," he finally said. "We were to be married, but she chose someone else, someone with steadier prospects and cleaner hands." He looked down at his own hands, strong and work-roughened. "I needed a fresh start, somewhere I could build something of my own." "And have you found what you were looking for?" Gabrielle asked softly. His blue eyes met hers. "Parts of it. The ranch is doing well. I've made good friends here. But a home feels empty with just one person." The honesty of his answer stirred something in Gabrielle's heart. "I understand that feeling." On the third morning, as Nathan returned from hunting, his expression was alert. "Riders coming," he said, quickly helping Gabrielle gather their few personal items. "Could be the posse returning, or the Reeves gang," Gabrielle finished, her heart racing. "Into the root cellar," Nathan directed, moving the rug aside and lifting the trapdoor. "Take this." He handed her his revolver. "I'll be right outside. If anything happens to me, wait until dark, then follow the creek north. It'll lead you to my friend Michael Blackwood's ranch. You can trust him." "Nathan," Gabrielle began, but he cut her off with a gentle finger to her lips. "No time." "Please, Gabrielle." His eyes held hers for one intense moment. "Stay safe." She descended into the cool darkness of the root cellar, and Nathan closed the trapdoor, replacing the rug. Through the cracks between the floorboards, Gabrielle could see slivers of the room above. She watched Nathan check his rifle, then move to the window. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. A voice called out, "Hello, the shack. Nathan Keller, you in there?" Relief flooded Gabrielle as she recognized her brother's voice. Nathan opened the door and she heard the muffled sounds of men talking. A moment later, the trapdoor opened and Nathan's face appeared, lighting up with a smile. "It's safe. Your brother's here." Gabrielle climbed out of the cellar with Nathan's help, her legs stiff from crouching in the confined space. George stood just inside the doorway, his left arm in a sling, his face pale but determined. "Gabby." He crossed to her in 2 strides, embracing her with his good arm. "Thank God you're safe. When I heard about the stage—" "I'm fine," she assured him, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. "Thanks to Nathan." George turned to Nathan, extending his right hand. I can never repay what you've done for my sister and her child." Nathan shook the offered hand. "No repayment necessary." "The posse?" Gabrielle asked. "Caught up with the Reeves gang at the territory line," George explained. "3 dead, including Jim Reeves himself. The rest are in custody, headed for trial in Santa Fe. So it's safe to return to Tucumcari." Gabrielle looked between her brother and Nathan. George nodded. "I brought the wagon. We can leave whenever you're ready." An unexpected pang of regret struck Gabrielle at the thought of leaving the shack and Nathan. These few days, strange as they had been, had created a connection between them that she wasn't ready to sever. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan said quietly, "I'll ride alongside the wagon just to be safe." The journey to Tucumcari took the better part of a day, with George driving the wagon as carefully as possible over the rough terrain. Nathan rode alongside, occasionally dropping back to check their trail or riding ahead to scout the path. Each time he returned to the wagon, his eyes would find Gabrielle's, a silent communication passing between them. Tucumcari appeared on the horizon just as the sun was beginning to set, its buildings glowing golden in the fading light. Gabrielle felt a mixture of anticipation and unease. This was to be her new home, the place where her child would be born and raised. Yet in just a few short days, her perception of her future had subtly shifted in ways she couldn't yet define. George's home stood behind his mercantile, a modest but comfortable dwelling that he had clearly prepared for her arrival. A small bedroom had been arranged with a new quilt on the bed and curtains at the window. "It's not fancy," George apologized, "but I thought you'd be more comfortable here than at the hotel until you find a place of your own." "It's perfect," Gabrielle assured him, though she couldn't help but notice Nathan standing awkwardly by the door, his hat in his hands, clearly preparing to take his leave. "Mr. Keller," George said, turning to the cowboy, "please stay for supper. It's the least we can offer." Nathan hesitated, his eyes finding Gabrielle's. "I should get back to my ranch. The hands will be wondering where I've been." "Please," Gabrielle said softly, "just one meal." Something in her voice must have reached him, for Nathan nodded. "All right, thank you." Supper was a simple affair, George apologizing for his bachelor cooking, but the conversation flowed easily. George was full of plans for Gabrielle's future in Tucumcari, speaking enthusiastically about her helping in the store and introducing her to the town's small community. "Mrs. Peterson runs a ladies' sewing circle on Thursdays," he told her. "And Reverend Daniel's wife has already asked after you. They'll all make you feel welcome." Gabrielle smiled and nodded, but she found her attention repeatedly drawn to Nathan, who spoke little but watched her with an intensity that sent warmth spreading through her chest. As the meal concluded, Nathan finally rose to leave. "Thank you for the hospitality," he said to George, then turned to Gabrielle. "Mrs. Johnson." He tipped his hat, his eyes conveying more than his simple words. "Mr. Keller," she replied, hoping he could read in her expression what she couldn't say aloud. "Thank you again for everything." At the door, Nathan paused. "I'll check in tomorrow if that's all right, just to make sure you're settling in." "That would be fine," George answered, but it was Gabrielle's nod that Nathan acknowledged with a final tip of his hat before stepping out into the night. After he left, Gabrielle helped George clean up despite his protests that she should rest. "You're as stubborn as Mother was," George said with affection, "always needing to keep busy." "It helps me think," Gabrielle admitted. George studied her face in the lamplight. "He's a good man, Nathan Keller." Gabrielle felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, he is. Known him for about 3 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings and generous when someone's in need." George's tone was deliberately casual. "Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, though." "George," Gabrielle protested, though her heart quickened at his words. "Just an observation, sister dear." George's smile was gentle. "You've been through a lot. I'm not suggesting anything. Just noting that life has a way of bringing unexpected blessings sometimes." Gabrielle didn't respond, but as she prepared for bed later, her brother's words echoed in her mind. Was it possible that Nathan felt something beyond the protective instinct that had led him to save her? And what of her own feelings, the warmth that spread through her when their eyes met, the comfort she found in his presence, the disappointment she'd felt when he left? It was too soon, she told herself firmly. Thomas had been gone only months, and her heart was still healing. Besides, she barely knew Nathan Keller. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was Nathan's face that filled her dreams, his blue eyes crinkling with a rare smile, his strong hands gentle as they helped her from the root cellar, his voice deep and reassuring as he promised to keep her and her child safe. True to his word, Nathan appeared at the mercantile the following afternoon. Gabrielle was arranging a display of fabric when the bell above the door jingled, and she turned to find him standing there, hat in hand, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt. "Mr. Keller," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "How nice to see you, Mrs. Johnson." He nodded, his eyes taking in her appearance as if reassuring himself that she was well. "I was in town picking up supplies and thought I'd check in as promised." George emerged from the back room, smiling broadly at the sight of Nathan. "Perfect timing. I was just telling Gabrielle about the Founders' Day celebration this Saturday. The whole town turns out for it: picnic, dancing, games for the children." Nathan shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "I don't usually attend town gatherings." "You should make an exception this year," George pressed, ignoring Gabrielle's warning glance. "Especially since my sister has no escort and I'll be busy with the booth for the store." The pointed suggestion hung in the air for a moment before Nathan cleared his throat. "If Mrs. Johnson would like company, I'd be honored to escort her." All eyes turned to Gabrielle, who felt a flush creeping up her neck. "I would appreciate the company," she managed, "being new in town." A small smile tugged at the corner of Nathan's mouth. "Then I'll call for you at noon on Saturday." After he left, Gabrielle rounded on her brother. "That was hardly subtle, George," George laughed, unrepentant. "Subtlety was never my strong suit, Gabby. Besides, I saw how you looked at him and how he looked at you." "It's too soon," she protested weakly. George's expression softened. "Thomas would want you to be happy, sister. You know that as well as I do." Gabrielle didn't argue, but as the week progressed, she found herself looking forward to Saturday with growing anticipation. She carefully altered one of her dresses to accommodate her expanding waistline, adding a sash of blue ribbon that matched her eyes, and she couldn't help thinking Nathan's as well. Saturday dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for the outdoor celebration. When Nathan arrived at precisely noon, Gabrielle was struck again by how handsome he was, especially now, cleaned up and wearing what was clearly his best shirt and vest. "You look lovely," he said simply as he helped her into his buggy. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You clean up quite well yourself." The ride to the town square was short, but Gabrielle savored every moment of sitting beside Nathan, aware of his strength and the careful way he handled the horses. At the celebration, it seemed everyone wanted to meet the miracle woman who survived the stage robbery and the hero rancher who saved her. Gabrielle found herself telling the story again and again, though she noticed Nathan always deflected praise, insisting he'd done only what anyone would do. His modesty only increased her admiration for him. As the afternoon wore on, they strolled through the celebration together, sampling foods from the various booths, watching the children's games and chatting with townspeople. Nathan gradually relaxed, and Gabrielle discovered he had a dry wit that made her laugh more than she had in months. When the musicians began setting up for dancing, Nathan turned to her uncertainly. "I'm not much of a dancer, but if you'd like." "I'd love to," Gabrielle said quickly. "Though I may not be very graceful these days." She gestured ruefully at her rounded belly. Nathan's expression softened as he looked at her. "You're the most graceful woman here." The simple sincerity of the compliment took Gabrielle's breath away. When Nathan led her to the dance floor and carefully placed one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, she felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with her pregnancy and everything to do with the man before her. They moved slowly to the music, Nathan's usual confidence somewhat diminished by the dancing, but his attention entirely focused on her. As they turned, Gabrielle caught sight of George watching them with undisguised approval. "Your brother seems pleased," Nathan observed, following her gaze. Gabrielle sighed. "He thinks he's being clever playing matchmaker." Nathan missed a step, then recovered smoothly. "And how do you feel about that?" The directness of the question surprised her. I'm not sure," she admitted honestly. "Everything has happened so quickly." Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "I understand. You've been through a lot and your husband hasn't been gone long." "It's not just that," Gabrielle said softly, needing him to understand. "When Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. I came west expecting to raise this child alone, perhaps eventually find some kind of contentment as a widow and mother. And now," she met his gaze steadily, "now I find myself wondering if there might be another path." Something flickered in Nathan's blue eyes, hope perhaps. "Gabrielle," but whatever he meant to say was interrupted as a commotion broke out near the food tables. A man's voice rose above the music, slurred with drink and angry. "That's her, the woman who survived the Reeves gang." Gabrielle turned to see a rough-looking man pointing at her, his face contorted with rage. "My brother Jim is dead because of you, shot down like a dog." Nathan immediately pulled Gabrielle behind him, his posture tense. "That's Jim Reeves' brother Seth," he said in a low voice. "He was in jail when the gang hit the bank." The drunk man staggered forward, his hand moving to his belt where a knife gleamed. "They hung my brother yesterday in Santa Fe," he snarled. "And it's your fault." Several men moved to intercept him, but he was quick despite his drunkenness. He lunged toward Gabrielle, knife raised. Nathan pushed her further back, reaching for his own weapon, but it was George who acted first. Despite his injured arm, Gabrielle's brother swung a heavy wooden tray, catching Seth Reeves across the temple. The man crumpled to the ground, his knife clattering harmlessly beside him. The town marshal and his deputy quickly took custody of the unconscious man, dragging him away to the jail. The crowd buzzed with excitement, but Gabrielle found herself trembling, the shock of the moment catching up with her. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked urgently, his hands gentle on her shoulders as he searched her face. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. George hurried over, his face pale but determined. "Gabby, you're not hurt." "I'm fine," she finally managed. "Thanks to both of you." The incident cast a pall over the celebration, and Nathan insisted on taking Gabrielle home early. As they drove back to the Mercantile, he was quiet, his jaw set in a grim line. "You're angry," Gabrielle observed softly. "Not at you," Nathan replied, his voice tight. "At myself. I should have anticipated this. Seth Reeves has been trouble for years, and with his brother being executed." He shook his head. "I should have been more alert." "You couldn't have known," Gabrielle said, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "And nothing happened. I'm safe." Nathan glanced down at her hand on his sleeve, then covered it with his own. "This time." But as long as you're associated with me, you might be a target. The Reeves family has a long memory for grudges. Gabrielle felt a chill at his words. What are you saying? They had reached the mercantile, and Nathan helped her down from the buggy before answering. I'm saying I need to think about what's best for you and your child, and that might not be my continued presence in your life. Nathan, Gabrielle began, but he shook his head. Please, let me finish. When I caught you falling from that stagecoach, something changed for me. I've never met anyone like you, Gabrielle. Your strength, your kindness, the way you face whatever comes with such grace. He took a deep breath. I find myself caring for you in a way I didn't expect, but I won't put you in danger because of those feelings. Gabrielle felt tears gathering in her eyes. So you would walk away, just like that, if it kept you safe, yes. She studied his face in the fading light, seeing the conflict in his eyes. And if I don't want you to walk away, Nathan's expression softened. Gabrielle. You saved us, she said, one hand moving to her belly where the baby kicked as if in agreement. And in these past days, you've awakened something in me I thought died with Thomas Hope, for a future that includes more than just survival. She took a step closer to him. I don't want safety if it means losing that, losing you. For a long moment, Nathan stood motionless, his eyes locked with hers. Then, with deliberate slowness, he raised one hand to her cheek. I want to do right by you, he said softly. Both of you. Then stay, Gabrielle whispered. Give us time to discover what might be between us. Nathan's answer was to lower his head and brush his lips against hers, the lightest of kisses, respectful of her condition and the newness of their feelings, yet filled with promise. I'll call on you tomorrow, he said as he stepped back. If that's all right. Gabrielle nodded, her heart too full for words. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt both new and somehow familiar. Nathan called on Gabrielle almost daily, sometimes just for a brief visit at the store, other times taking her for short rides in his buggy or walks along the quieter streets of Tucumcari. George, observing their growing closeness with approval, often found reasons to be elsewhere when Nathan visited. As Gabrielle's pregnancy advanced, Nathan's protectiveness increased. He arranged for the town doctor to check on her regularly, brought books for her to read during the hours she needed to rest, and seemed to anticipate her needs before she voiced them. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch behind the mercantile watching the sunset, Nathan took Gabrielle's hand in his. There's something I want to show you, he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident voice. What is it? Gabrielle asked, curious at his tone. Nathan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small daguerreotype, which he handed to her carefully. The image showed a neat ranch house with a wide porch, flower beds along the front, and mountains visible in the background. My home, Nathan explained. I took this to the photographer in Santa Fe last week when I went to deliver some horses. Gabrielle studied the image, noting the care evident in the well-maintained building and grounds. It's lovely. I can see why you're proud of it. I've been adding to it, Nathan continued, his thumb rubbing small circles on her hand. A new room on the east side, large windows to catch the morning light. He paused, then added softly, it would make a fine nursery. Gabrielle's breath caught as she looked up from the image to his face. Nathan, his blue eyes were intent, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. I know it's soon. I know you may not be ready, but I want you to know that when you are, if you ever are, there's a place for you, for both of you. He glanced at her rounded belly. I'm not asking for an answer now. Just for you to consider the possibility of a future together. Tears filled Gabrielle's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. You've thought about this, about us. Every day since I caught you falling from that stage, Nathan admitted. At first I told myself it was just concern for your welfare, then that it was too soon after your husband's passing. But the truth is, Gabrielle, I love you. I think I started falling in love with you that very first day when you were so brave despite everything." Gabrielle squeezed his hand, her heart overflowing. "When this baby comes," she said softly, "I want you there, and after. I want to see this nursery with the morning light." Nathan's face transformed with joy. "You mean?" "I mean I love you too, Nathan Keller. And yes, I'll consider that future together. More than consider it." He gathered her gently into his arms, mindful of her condition, and kissed her with all the tenderness and passion he'd been holding back. When they parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you won't regret this. I'll spend every day making you and the little one happy." 2 weeks later, as the first snow of winter dusted Tucumcari, Gabrielle went into labor. George sent the store clerk running for both the doctor and Nathan, who arrived breathless and anxious. "She's asking for you," George told him, leading the way to Gabrielle's bedroom. Inside, Gabrielle lay pale against the pillows, her face contorted with pain as another contraction seized her. When it passed, she opened her eyes and saw Nathan standing hesitantly by the door. "Nathan," she breathed, extending her hand. "You're here." He crossed to her side immediately, taking her hand in both of his. "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." The doctor, a kindly older man with spectacles perched on his nose, cleared his throat. "Mr. Keller, it's not customary for men to be present during delivery." Before Nathan could respond, Gabrielle tightened her grip on his hand. "He stays," she said firmly. "Please, I need him." The doctor looked between them, then nodded. "Very well. But stay at her head, Mr. Keller. And try not to faint." Nathan's lips quirked in a small smile. "I've delivered hundreds of calves, doctor. I think I can manage." The labor was long and difficult. Through the night, Nathan remained at Gabrielle's side, wiping her brow with cool cloths, supporting her during the worst contractions, and murmuring encouragement when her strength flagged. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he told her as dawn approached and she cried that she couldn't continue. "You can do this, just a little longer." And finally, as the first rays of morning sun filtered through the window, a lusty cry filled the room. The doctor lifted a squirming, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Mrs. Johnson," he announced. "A fine, healthy boy." Tears streamed down Gabrielle's exhausted face as the doctor placed the swaddled infant in her arms. She gazed down at the tiny features, Thomas's chin, perhaps, but her own nose and brow. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I've waited so long to meet you." She looked up at Nathan, who was watching them with undisguised wonder and love. "Would you like to hold him?" Nathan's hands trembled slightly as he took the small bundle. The baby quieted immediately in his arms, seeming to study Nathan's face with unfocused eyes. "He's perfect," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Just like his mother." Gabrielle smiled through her tears. "What do you think of the name Thomas Nathan Johnson, for his father, and for the man who will love him as his own?" Nathan's eyes glistened as he gazed from the baby to Gabrielle. "I think it's a fine name, and I'll be honored to be a father to him if you'll have me. If I'll have you." Gabrielle repeated softly, "Nathan Keller, I want nothing more in this world." 6 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, Nathan and Gabrielle were married in a small ceremony at the Tucumcari church. Baby Thomas, dressed in a christening gown made from Gabrielle's wedding dress, slept peacefully in George's arms as the couple exchanged vows. "I promise to love and protect you and Thomas with everything I have," Nathan said, his voice steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto Gabrielle's finger. "From the moment I caught you falling from that stagecoach, I knew my life would never be the same. You brought light back into my world, Gabrielle, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to deserve the gift of your love." Gabrielle's voice trembled as she responded, "When I lost Thomas, I thought my heart would never heal. I came west seeking only safety and a quiet life for my child. Instead, I found courage I didn't know I possessed, and a love I never expected." She placed her hand over his heart. "You caught us when we were falling in more ways than one. I promise to love you faithfully and build a joyful home with you for all our days." After the ceremony, they traveled to Nathan's ranch, where the household staff, a middle-aged couple who had long served as cook and foreman, had prepared a wedding feast and decorated the house with evergreen boughs and candles. As Nathan carried Gabrielle across the threshold, baby Thomas cradled in her arms, he paused in the entryway, his face solemn. "Welcome home, Mrs. Keller." The name, spoken for the first time, brought fresh tears to Gabrielle's eyes. "It sounds right, doesn't it? It sounds perfect." Nathan kissed her tenderly, then led her through the house to the east room he had spoken of months before. The nursery was everything he had promised, spacious and bright, with a hand-carved cradle that Nathan admitted he'd been working on since the day after the Founders' Day celebration. A rocking chair sat by the window, positioned to catch the morning light, and colorful quilts hung on the walls for both warmth and decoration. "Oh, Nathan," Gabrielle breathed, taking in the loving details. "It's beautiful." "There's one more thing," Nathan said, leading her to the cradle. Inside was a small wooden horse, expertly carved and polished to a soft gleam. "I made this for him," Nathan explained, picking up the toy. "My father made one for me when I was born. It's a tradition I wanted to continue. For our son." Gabrielle's heart swelled with love as she watched Nathan gently place the toy beside the sleeping Thomas. "Our son," she repeated softly. "Yes, he is." 5 years later, Gabrielle sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Nathan taught young Thomas to ride his first pony. The boy, a sturdy child with his mother's dark hair and his adoptive father's blue eyes, laughed with delight as the gentle animal trotted around the corral. "Look, Mama," he called. "I'm a cowboy like Papa." "I see you, sweetheart," Gabrielle called back, shifting the baby in her arms to wave. Little Sarah, just 6 months old, gurgled happily at the sight of her father and brother. Nathan glanced up, his face breaking into the smile that was no longer rare but appeared readily and often. In the years since their marriage, the lines of worry had softened in his face, replaced by laugh lines around his eyes and mouth. As Thomas continued his careful circles on the pony, Nathan crossed to the porch and sat beside Gabrielle, one arm going around her shoulders as he used his free hand to tickle Sarah's chin. "He's a natural," Nathan said proudly. "Going to be a better rider than his old man." "Just like his sister will be," Gabrielle predicted, smiling down at the baby who was already showing signs of her father's determined nature. Nathan pressed a kiss to Gabrielle's temple. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Not since breakfast," Gabrielle teased. "I think you're slipping." "Well, we can't have that." Nathan turned her face gently toward his. "I love you, Gabrielle Keller, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow." As they kissed, Thomas's voice floated over from the corral. "Papa, are you kissing Mama again?" They broke apart, laughing. "Yes, son," Nathan called back, "and I plan to keep kissing her for at least the next 50 years. "Yuck," was Thomas's considered opinion as he guided his pony in another careful circle. Gabrielle leaned against Nathan's solid shoulder, contentment filling her heart as she gazed out at their expanded ranch, the new barn, the larger herd of cattle, the row of fruit trees they'd planted the spring after their wedding that were now beginning to bear. "Did you ever imagine that day when the stagecoach came through Apache Pass that this would be your life?" she asked softly. Nathan's arm tightened around her. "Not in my wildest dreams. But from the moment I caught you, something inside me knew. You and Thomas were meant to be mine to love and protect." Gabrielle thought back to that terrifying moment of freefall, when she'd been certain she and her unborn child would die on the hard New Mexico earth. Instead, strong arms had caught her, and a deep voice had promised, "I've got you both." It was a promise Nathan had kept every day since, in ways both large and small. And Gabrielle had kept her own promises, creating a warm, loving home where laughter rang out frequently, where the light of love and family had healed old wounds and created new joy. "I think," she said, resting her head against her husband's shoulder as they watched their son ride proudly around the corral, their daughter cooing in Gabrielle's arms, "that sometimes life's greatest blessings come to us in the most unexpected ways. Like falling out of a stagecoach into the arms of a lonely rancher," Nathan suggested, his blue eyes twinkling. "Exactly like that." Gabrielle kissed him again, softly. "And I wouldn't change a single moment of our journey." As the sun began to set over the New Mexico mountains, casting long golden shadows across their land, Nathan and Gabrielle remained on the porch, their children close, their hearts full. The stagecoach route that had once brought terror now occasionally brought welcome visitors and mail from distant family, a reminder of how a moment of danger had led to a lifetime of love. Nathan's hand found Gabrielle's, their fingers intertwining as naturally as their lives had. "I've got you," he whispered, echoing those first words that had begun their story. Gabrielle smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I've got you," she replied, "always." In the golden light of sunset, with the sound of their son's laughter floating on the breeze and their daughter nestled safely in Gabrielle's arms, they knew that the promise made in a moment of crisis had become the foundation of their lives, a love story born in danger, but destined to thrive in the peace they had built together.